But in order for Canada to play a really significant role in the future of food and what that can look like, we do need these varying kind of ecosystem layers, right? We need more startups. We need more entrepreneurs thinking that agriculture is, in fact, an industry that they can, do something in. And that means having a conversation about being a software developer and working in ag, or being a microbiologist and working in ag. It's not just about these applications of technology on the farm. It's how can you look at the food that you consume and reimagine it, right? Make it more sustainable.
Everybody, welcome. We are excited today to have another episode of Launchcast. We are joined by some phenomenally talented, intelligent, wonderful people and Alberio. So it's going to be a great time. We're going to enjoy ourselves. We're going to have fun. I've got some stats. We're going to start off with that. I have stats. They gave me stats right here. Boom. I didn't know these stats. It's fascinating. 2021, the Canadian agricultural and agri-food system employed 2.1 million people. They generate 134.9 billion, which is about 6.8% of Canada's GDP, which is fascinating, way higher than I understood. And really, we are looking as a whole in the agri-space is looking at evolving and growing those numbers. So to speak more intelligently about that, we've got some, as I said earlier, intelligent people to join us. Wilson and Marlise here with Tallgrass Ventures. We're looking forward to getting deeper with you guys, digging in and understanding. We've got this fine fella here to join us as well.
I'm here just for the great looks.
That's it. Entertainment purposes. That's it. You just got to own it and know it. That's it at the end of the day. So as we go through that, why don't we just start with a quick intro? I'm a big believer in ladies first. So Marlise, why don't you kick us off?
Director of platform with Tallgrass. Which basically means I support our portfolio companies on some of our value-added activities and encourage how we participate in the broader ecosystem.
Awesome. And maybe dive a little deeper into where you came before Tallgrass.
Sure. So I was with another AgTech venture fund and accelerator before Tallgrass, and before that I managed the agriculture sector strategy for the city of Calgary, which is actually where I met Wilson when he was a tech founder of an ag tech company. So we've known each other for a couple of years, but persuaded me to come and join the team at Tallgrass.
Persuasive fella.
He is.
So on that note, why don't you tell us about yourself, persuasive fella?
Sure, quite the setup. So managing partner at Tallgrass Ventures, I guess co-founder as well, along with Chris Edwards. And so, in terms of kind of my background, come out of agriculture, fifth generation farmer from southern Saskatchewan, number of left turns, ended up in mergers and acquisitions and corporate finance before getting back to what I always intended to do, which was build businesses, which is where my paths crossed with Marlise, was through that journey, building tech companies in particular, not just in ag tech, but primarily in ag. And then, that ultimately led to a lot of what we saw in the market and the opportunity for Tallgrass and how we kind of positioned it and kind of led to this journey and kicked it off.
Awesome. That's fantastic. For those of you that haven't tuned in, Alberta, why don't you give a quick intro yourself?
Sure, just real quick. I'm co-founder and CEO of Launchcode and have the pleasure of working with this phenomenal team in-house, and also have the pleasure of being part of podcasts like this one. So really keen to learn a little bit more about Tallgrass and everything that you guys are doing.
Love it.
Tell us a little bit about yourself now.
Thank you, Brandon.
Who's this guy asking all the questions?
Another fancy fella, right? So Robbie Butchart, Chief Revenue Officer and partner here at Launchcode. Love doing what we do every day. Come and have fun and solve the world problems. We joked about that, but actually feel like we can do that. So it's a pretty exciting team to be a part of. We're pretty blessed daily to have a phenomenal group of people to work with. And we get to meet people like you. So I'm really excited. That's right. You should both do it at the same time. No? Okay, we're gonna go on. So with that, let's maybe dive into a little bit and let's get some detail and granularity to what Tallgrass does, how do they support the ecosystem, the evolution, and what the vision for the organization kind of looks like.
Sure. So, Tallgrass, just overall, we're an investment firm focused entirely within the ag and food space. And in particular, what we're very focused on are the technologies that are going to redefine the way that our world is producing our food, our fuels, and our fibers. we believe, there's a big lift ahead of us around how we think about this. And lots of people talk about growing population and all sorts of things. We've also got sustainability equations. We look at all of this and see big opportunities for technology, and how can we do better? How can we kind of rethink the way we do things? And so Tallgrass, one of the things that's interesting when we looked out at the ecosystem is there's very few firms, just kind of overall, that are exclusively focused in this space, and that's where Tallgrass sits. Ag and food is super complicated. It's in all aspects of our lives in lots of ways that we don't even realize, and understanding that complexity, but then leaning in and helping to drive that forward to be what the next generation is. That's exactly where Tallgrass is sitting.
Awesome. That's a great explanation. Anything you want to add to that from your perspective?
I think for us too, having both been in the ecosystem in ag and in tech, was this gap around companies, early stage companies, needing support for how they could build better businesses. And so for us, it's really important. We put a lot of stock in how we can be like true value add investors, so much so to the point that it's a part of our diligence. Like, we look at how we can add value. We look at how we are values aligned with some of the companies we look to invest in, and how can we do that early on so that we can manage expectations, and we can add value in a way that they want to receive value, not in just a way we think we can provide it.
And that's very unique. There's not many businesses in your space or firms in your space that do that. So what made you guys decide to go that route rather than the traditional route?
Well, it's almost kind of back to first principles on building a business, right? We're in a business. We happen to invest in companies as part of our business, but our job kind of at its core is to multiply capital. We too have investors, but we believe that the way we can do that best is when we look out at the ecosystem, so the world of companies that we would want to invest into. How do we help multiply capital best? Well, we need to be aligned with the management teams, because if we're multiplying their capital, that means we're multiplying ours. And so we want to be able to help and lean in and do all those things. But also, our investors are often looking for more than just economic returns. And so how can we help in that respect? Maybe they're trying to figure out how to engage with the innovation layer of the sector to future-proof their businesses. Maybe they have kind of sustainability goals and aspirations as well. And what it comes down to when we kind of keep peeling the layers back and back and back is we said, well, we want a Tallgrass dollar to be greater than another dollar. Like, that's ultimately kind of what we want the market to see. We want our investors to believe that. So if we're investing in a company, and we want the company to believe that, and we want all of the people we're co-investing with, so other people that we partner with and we're beside and other investors, to also believe that. And then what starts to happen then is you get this flywheel. Like any business, you're trying to drive a flywheel, which we think gets then really powerful as we continue to grow.
So a couple things you mentioned about due diligence process already that you guys do, but I'm really curious, like what is that? What are you guys doing, and what makes it your ideal founder that you guys would love to invest in?
That's a good question. Be ready. I'm going to spin that one back to you.
Nice.
I think there's a number of things. We've purposefully built our processes to try and strip as much of our own personal bias out of it. So how can we as a team, holistically look at some of these opportunities and make informed decisions based on the information that we have? And so, with any type of investment, you're looking at the team and company maturity and market. But I think one of the things that, again, we put a lot of stock in is how do we find alignment with a company beforehand, right? It's one thing for us to say we've added value. It's another thing entirely for them to feel like they've received it. And the companies we work with are at varying stages. And so some are repeat founders and some are first-time founders. What they need for support looks really differently. And so we need to manage our expectations in terms of how we can help them, what they want help on. At the end of the day, we can only guide them to make better and informed decisions. We can't actually, force them to do that. And so I think for us, it's a lot of, the core metrics of things you want to look at with a scalable, venture style return of a business, but also the people and the human capital component. That's the part that I'm really driven by. Wilson probably has a different perspective, but I think that human piece often gets overlooked. You know, this is a long-term marriage. This is like 7 years that, like, do we really want to be spending our time with these founders? And to, you know, brush past that, I think is a mistake. So how can we really truly build authentic, you know, trusting relationships with our founders? Because I think, like Wilson said, that's how we help them build better businesses, how we have hard conversations around what could be done, what should be done, and how we can all improve.
Well, and it's also not just do we want to spend time with them, do they want to spend time with us?
Totally.
Right? Like this is, and so I think that there's a bunch of misconceptions around venture capital, right? That we're coming in, I've heard the term vulture capital. We're coming in like we somehow want to scoop this business up and run it ourselves. That's our grand dream. And it's, well, maybe some firms are that way. That's certainly not our approach.
We don't have the time for that.
We don't have time for that. We don't want to run this business. What we want is to help you run it. Think of us as an extension of your team. And so, you know, do they want us to help? And like, it's like all things, right? We might love what they're doing, but they want to do their own thing. That's totally fine. This is their business, not ours. And so kind of finding that mixture. And so our diligence often from the company's perspective will look similar to other venture capital investors. Do you have a market? Do you have a problem? Is somebody going to actually pay for whatever this thing is you're building? You know, da-da-da-da-da-da. But then we spend a bunch of time internally, which is what Marlise is talking about, internally going, okay, well, do we have an ability to give this company an unfair advantage from our own team? Can we go put our finger on the scale of success and tip it in favor of this company? And if we can come out of that conversation internally saying, oh yeah, we think so, then we go to the company and say, okay, here's what we're thinking. What do you think?
That's interesting. And it's very interesting mindsets, very different. I'm very curious on yours because we've had similar conversations with folks in the startup world, different industries, but I think a lot of what's been talked about applies. And I'd love you to add your thoughts into this.
Sure. Well, I think obviously Talgrass has got a lot more experience. You guys are applying, you know, capital. On our side, we don't necessarily apply investor capital, but there are organizations where we'll do a joint venture or partnership with. And I loved what you said, Marlise, about, you know, the alignment piece, about not only are we providing value, but are they actually getting value from us? Because I think that has a lot to do with how we look at it as well, right? So, you know, for us, we love to see organizations that have a deeper sense of purpose, right? The product, the innovation that they're trying to come out with, is there a deeper sense of purpose? You guys, by default, that's what you invest in, you know, in the AgTech space. For us, you know, it's looking at that technology. Does it have, you know, does it make the world a better place at the end of the day, right? If we can see that, and if we can see a redefining of success within the founders themselves. So, you know, are they in it purely for, is it monetary gains and job title, or are they in it because they truly have redefined success, what success means to them, which is, you know, that deeper impact, or am I making a change in the world? And if we find that, that's like, you know, that wonderful star that we love to go after and be part of that. But we also have to be aligned, and we have to actually be able to provide them value. So I love it. I think you guys are, you know, that's fantastic what you guys are doing and how you see it. Tell me a little bit. You know, the second part of that question is like, what's the ideal, ideal founder that you guys love to see? Like, what's an ideal case?
I think you've already touched on it, right? Like, it has to be beyond dollars. It has to be beyond title. You know, like someone who's truly in love with the problem, and even better, or more importantly, the customer's problem. Because it's the same as, you know, we can add value. A founder can build a solution, but if the customer doesn't see it as a solution, then, you know, who cares? Yeah. And so, you know, a founder that has kind of that passion around what they're doing and that deep understanding of the space and the markets that they're in. But then also what's really important is that openness and willingness to be wrong and to come in with problems and to accept help and all of these things. And that kind of, you know, that fluidity, I guess, in the whole kind of conversation, that's really important. Because if you're not prepared to go in, I always say nobody has the market cornered on good ideas. And so if you're not kind of prepared to come in with that mindset, then this probably isn't a good fit. It doesn't mean you're not a good person. It doesn't mean your business isn't awesome, but it's probably not a good fit for us.
Very interesting. I want to shift gears, Nathan. We're going to shift gears?
Yeah.
We're going to shift gears.
You're in the driver's seat.
I know, it's fun. It would be amiss, I think, not to discuss and dive a little bit into the whole SVB thing that's going on down in the U.S. and what we're seeing with, the closures and just the kind of noise that's happening down there. So being in the space you're both in and kind of that industry as a whole, talk about a little bit how that's impacting you as an organization, what you foresee this impact looking like a little more long-term from your perspectives. Love to gain that wisdom. I'm sure if you
Loaded question.
I know.
Yeah, super loaded. The what's interesting. So there's a couple of things that I think are interesting that are playing out, and it's very dynamic. So even by the time this episode goes live, it's probably something different. But over the weekend, we saw UBS and Credit Suisse get jammed together, against their will, to the point where the Swiss government waived the need for a shareholders meeting, which is pretty serious kind of moves. We're still going to see more stuff play out in the U.S. From the Canadian perspective, I think what's interesting is there's an element of direct impact is a bit less so, right? SVB was not a taking deposit level kind of bank in Canada. And so, if you were banking in Canada as a startup, you already had to have a relationship with one of the Canadian banks, and whether that's kind of one of the big banks or a more regional player. But that's not to say that SVB wasn't in the market and doing a lot of stuff. And we could see, from our perspective, the behavior toward technology innovation startups evolve from the big kind of incumbents in Canada because of SVB's presence and what they've done in the US. And let's be clear, right? SVB grew over a duration of time, a meaningful amount of time, to be a top 20 bank in the US. Like, that doesn't just happen, right? Like, you're onto something there. And that's without even kind of getting into what's happening with First Republic and what happened with Signature Bank and kind of all these other things. And so to watch how this evolves is going to be very interesting. I think what has been interesting is we saw HSBC agree to buy very quickly the UK operations of SVB. We have not seen a similar tie-up in either the US or Canadian markets for SVB. So that, to me, kind of says something. It was fairly well documented that was the preferred outcome, both for the Canadian and US regulators. It was just find someone to buy this. That was the playbook in 2008, where we saw Merrill Lynch and Bank of America get put in a room and said, no one leaves the room until a deal is announced. And by the way, the deal is being announced on Monday morning. And so, to see that play out. So now, where does it reverberate? Well, there's a couple things that are interesting. It actually, if anything, we saw it as it became an accelerant to what we were doing at Tallgrass, right? A lot of people have talked about quantitative, moves and inflation, interest rate hikes are what drove to the demise of SVB. Well, there's a bunch of dominoes that had to kind of be set up in order for that to happen in the first place. So maybe it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know. There's people smarter than me. But the reason we're seeing these interest rate hikes are to get inflation under control. The reason inflation is running is a lot of it's being driven by food and agriculture, and we've got a continued conflict in Russia and Ukraine. We've got all this stuff that's out of whack, almost entirely on the food portfolio. And so, all the reasons why we're seeing a ton of activity and all the reasons why we think this is an excellent spot to be and all the reasons, why we're excited about it, only kind of become even more green lights with what we're seeing kind of happening around the world and how we're being positioned. How the market responds going forward, to TBD. I think two things happen. Either one, the big banks kind of step in and consume SVB's market share that they proved was a kind of product and go-to-market strategy that worked in innovation, or they don't. And if they don't, then I think it creates an opportunity for a challenger to come up. And whether that's a traditional bank that just doesn't have the same market share as one of the big ones, or a whole net new neo bank like a neo financial that says, oh, wait a minute, now this creates a wedge for us. So, as we as we look all the time, on the other side of risk, there's always opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
well said.
I love that.
Yeah, well said. Let's talk a little bit about some of the way that this capital has been put into some of the ventures you guys are expanding on. And albeit I'm sure there's things you can't discuss, but let's if we can kind of bring some context and some tangibility into maybe some people that would be interested in exactly what you're looking for, what you're seeing from an innovation perspective in this space. Because I mean, ag for the longest of time, maybe not the food and that blended kind of line, but ag, it's always been innovative. Some of the coolest stuff that's happening out there is what's inside what you're seeing, roam around in some of those fields. Like there's some really cool stuff that they've adapted and adopted over the years, and kind of quietly, like it had from our perspective, maybe I'm the only one, but it hasn't been overly exploited, if you will, in that innovative mindset. So what are some of the things that you guys are looking from the innovation side? What are you seeing? What's that evolution look like in that space? Start with yourself. Fun question.
Seeing the side eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time. I mean, obviously, I'm incredibly biased, but I think it's a really exciting time to be in this space. For all intents and purposes, agriculture is one of the biggest industrial sectors that has been the least digitized. Right? And so when we talk about this entire system from ag to food, there's so much opportunity for adoption of innovation. And as you mentioned, I mean, producers have been innovating forever, but we see, this next iteration of that looking differently, like being driven by data and connectivity and sustainability, right? These are all these macro forces, kind of like Wilson mentioned, that are pushing on ag and food, that are bringing it more to the forefront. I don't think anyone outside of, communities like ours that are directly connected to, agricultural producing regions had any line of sight into where their food is coming from. COVID shifted that, right? Consumers have more awareness, more interest, and more of a desire to understand where and how their food is getting to them and what sort of, environmental sustainable impact it has. And so I think the opportunity is wide open in ag and food. And we're seeing that. We're seeing everything from on the farm applications of ag technology, which is, I think, what everyone traditionally thinks of when they think ag tech. Yeah. And we're seeing everything, in biotechnology, cellular agriculture, precision fermentation, right? New ways to make protein, new ways to make synthetic fertilizers, inputs, right? There's the opportunities are endless. And like I said, we see it as the whole system. So we're all the way from farm to fork, how do we grow the food more sustainably, more efficiently, and how do we get it to consumers, last mile delivery more sustainably and more efficiently.
You want to add?
No, I think Marlise nailed it.
I'm curious if, on the deal flow side, where do you guys get majority of your, the founders that are coming to you? Is there specific areas that you guys like to be at and you meet with these people? Are they being referred to you? Where do you find them?
Yeah, all of the above. I think it comes back to our participation in the ecosystem. We want to be capital of choice for startups, for investors, and for our ecosystem partners. We want them to know if they refer a company to us, we're going to take the call. And so we get deal flow from everywhere. I think we've probably been a bit surprised by, I have been anyways, won't speak for Wilson, with where our deal flow is coming from. It's coming from everywhere. We partner with different government bodies, academic institutions, community organizations, other founders, other venture firms, right? The more that we can build our respective relationships as a firm, and kind of talk about our values, how we're hoping to support companies, what we want to be doing to helping them build better businesses. It's just that deal flow is coming. Like Wilson said, I think we're up to like 14 countries now, with companies just coming to us. Like, how did you even find us? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a power of, it's an interesting comment on the interconnectivity within the agriculture ecosystem on a global scale. I think to have 14 countries find us, and it's not because we've been out marketing or doing any of that sort of stuff. Yeah. If anything, quite the opposite. We've been busy trying to build a firm, because a lot of people forget we have to build a whole firm, an organization, as well as building the investment vehicle, as well as then figuring out where to invest it. So you kind of have 3 full-time jobs at the same time at this stage. And so to see deal flow come from so many different directions, part of it's also that we also say we're a very collaborative bunch. We're very friendly, and so if you're another investor, hey, we're happy to come in. We're not huge, and so it's unlikely that we can take a whole investment round in and of ourselves, but that doesn't change our view of how we're approaching it. Whether we're the biggest investor or the smallest investor, we have our capital in there, we are adding value. Well, now if you're an investor beside us, you're naturally getting the benefit of that and you're not paying for it. And so you can start to see some of this work. And same with, if you're an incumbent in the space, you've been around, you're trying to figure out how to future-proof, or you've just got a neat opportunity for your customers. It's the same sort of thing, right? If we're in there working, we're benefiting everybody.
That's interesting.
Are you seeing, so with your background, 5 generations in farming, right?
Yeah.
Are you seeing a change within the industry? Like, is the innovation coming from the farmers? Is it farmers turning into entrepreneurs, or is it entrepreneurs coming from the external? Or give us a little bit of insight into that.
I would say it's coming from all directions. The farmer, kind of as an animal, is a very innovative beast in and of themselves. Also fiercely independent. And so, they've got a long history, particularly in markets like Brazil and Australia, Canada, the US as well, very innovative because it had to be. We were farming at a time when we didn't have synthetic fertilizers or power steering or, forget GPS steering, like we barely even had a cab. And so in these machines. And so you had to get scrappy and you had to figure out what to do. And that's what happens when you have thin margins for long durations of time. You learn how to survive. And so what's been interesting, though, is now watching innovation come up out of the farm, which is great, right? These people deeply understand the problem that they're trying to solve. But then people, often there's been literally decades where whole generations have left the farm because margins were tight. This was a hard way to make a living. Go off to the city and get a good job, whatever. And so they've built all these other skills and experience. And now they're coming back to the farm. There's an element of that pull is hard. There's an element of, hey, it's a great space to be. All of a sudden people realize food doesn't come from a grocery store. Like, these are really fun problems. We get to put laser beams on tractors. This is cool stuff. And so they're coming back now with those skills and innovating as well. So we're kind of seeing it from multiple directions.
Not gonna lie, Austin Powers flashed in my head. Right? You said that.
Sharks with lasers.
Yeah, not sharks, it's not tractors.
Yeah, that's right.
Same, different.
Same. Yeah. No, I think it's an interesting kind of concept as you explain that for people that might not be as versed in this market. Like, it is something that has gone under the radar. There, you don't hear about it much. And so do you guys see that evolution happening, like how the word's going to get out there more? Like you mentioned, associations and things, Marlise, that you guys are part of, partnerships, and just driving the ecosystem. Is that an issue for the ecosystem as a whole? And maybe it's a broader question, but just as you were talking about, that was something like, how do we get the word out there more? Like, what type of things are you seeing evolve?
I think there's definitely an appetite within the venture landscape in egg and food. There's maybe just not a lot of understanding as to what that opportunity looks like, right? It's this kind of weird untapped market that people want to play in. And you're starting to see that with like exponential growth in capital deployment in egg and food, but it's predominantly been in a couple of key areas, right? Marketplaces, alternative proteins, things like that. And so I think it's starting to happen. And again, I come back to some of these macroeconomic forces. Wilson mentioned the war in Ukraine, inflation, rising costs. I think people are just becoming more aware that their food doesn't come from the grocery store, and that all of these conversations around climate change and environmental impact, that's making its way into agriculture. It's already there, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. And so there's more and more focus being put on this space. And with that, I think there's more and more focus on innovation. And so, like he mentioned, I think that innovation is coming from all different areas. But in order for Canada to play a really significant role in the future of food and what that can look like, we do need these varying kind of ecosystem layers, right? We need more startups. We need more entrepreneurs thinking that agriculture is, in fact, an industry that they can, do something in. And that means having a conversation about being a software developer and working in ag, or being a microbiologist and working in ag. It's not just about these applications of technology on the farm. It's how can you look at the food that you consume and reimagine it, right? Make it more sustainable. And so I think like I said, there's all of these major forces that are pushing food and agriculture into a more mainstream conversation, and that benefits us. Obviously, we feel like we're kind of in this sweet spot. We want to support early stage entrepreneurs. We're in ag and food, and we have, you know, a history and experience in this space, so we feel like we're pretty equipped to make that happen.
Speaking, you know, maybe expanding a little bit on that, what is the biggest opportunities you see coming down from all of these, you know, compliance measures that are coming down the pipe, or any of these laws that are being put in? Do you see any massive opportunities for entrepreneurs right now?
Such an intelligent question, man.
Yeah, someone did their homework. So we are focused on three kind of main themes that we think are tremendously interesting. One, we've, you know, kind of building on what we just talked about, you know, nitrogen, fertilizer. You can also tie it into synthetic crop protection. You know, this kind of world where we used advanced chemistry to grow and nurture our crops. And so that has become a world that is under intense scrutiny from an emissions perspective and a sustainability and pollution, right? There's conversations about microplastics and like all sorts of stuff. Well, that's that lens. I think you could build an entire fund just focused on how do we rethink fertility and crop protection. And so that's a really interesting space. And those are like, we're into real science stuff here, right? Like this is biology, this is gene editing, microbiology, chemistry, like these are huge problems that are going to redefine our world. Massive capital problems. And so I think that's really interesting. Another one, and Marlise touched on it, you know, we saw all this excitement around plant-based proteins and alternative meats and a bunch of stuff. While that's really interesting, we think we maybe got a little excited about some of those products. And so, well, wait a minute, what are we doing on the other side of the equation? How can we rethink animal production? How can we rethink animal health? Marlise touched on the other one around digitization, right? There is huge problems that can be solved. There's tons of them, and this kind of world of software and digital can move up and down the value chain for decades and barely scratch the surface. And so how do we think about that? How do we think about, you know, kind of moving that world forward?
I love it. Lots of world problems, and I'm sure there's tons of great people out there to
Just solving
solve
the world's problems one day at a time.
You started it off
One
that
day
way.
at a
Look at that tie-in. I mean, that wasn't even planned. Oh, that's awesome. I touched on it briefly. Is there anything else you guys want to explain about what the future of Tallgrass looks like for all of those interested and are going to be listening?
Grass is green and the sky, the sun is shining. Yeah, no, you know what? We just keep moving forward. You know, what's not changing is we're entirely focused on ag and food. The way we can lean in, that's not changing. Like these are core values to us. There's a huge amount of opportunity, and we don't think that this is fleeting whatsoever. We actually think we've seen this play out before in the 70s, and it kind of kicked off a decade of some of the biggest times in North American ag that followed, and we think we're there again. So, you know, it's more of a matter of let's continue to stay methodical about how we chop through the load.
Yourself, Marlise?
Yeah, I'm like incredibly biased, I think. Really excited about what we're building at Tallgrass and how we look at things a little bit differently. You know, everything we've talked about today, how can we truly look to support the ecosystem, support the communities that we're a part of, while also, you know, building up the agricultural ecosystem and food ecosystem as opportunities for, you know, real capital deployment. Bringing some visibility into what that whole spectrum of opportunity can look like, I think is something I'm super keen on. But yeah, being a part of Tallgrass has been it's been a lot of fun. And so just, yeah, hoping to keep that. Well, I know we're going to keep that going on top of everything else.
Love it. That's exciting. Is there anything that you guys wanted to bring up that this conversation that I didn't read any of the questions, actually, you guys wanted to? That's an organic combo. Yeah, no, I know, right? So is there anything you guys wanted to bring up that we didn't discuss today? I'd love to give that opportunity for you guys to put it out there.
We're both looking at each other. No, I don't think so. This is a great conversation, right? Like the you know, if people are looking for ways to get involved in the ecosystem, you know, companies like Launchcode, right? Like a lot of people wouldn't think of, hey, what's going on in ag? Well, there's a tremendous amount of, you know, people that understand the problems to solve, And I think ag has a bit of a bad habit, and it came out of kind of self-preservation, of looking within for its solutions, but expertise that are elsewhere, like the work that Launchcode does, that they're able to bring into the solving the problems within ag, can be tremendously powerful. And it's across whole spectrums, whether you want to talk about fintech or software, kind of the whole mechanics. We've talked about kind of what's happening with tractors, chemistry, you name it.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a little selfish plug right now. I didn't even pay him yet. I mean, that's pretty epic.
Don't worry, we're invoicing.
Yeah.
He's right though. I mean, this is the exact reason we, got talking to you guys at Launchcode, is recognizing that you have a ton of expertise that you can bring into this agricultural ecosystem. And I think the more people that we have talking about the opportunity, the more exciting it's going to be.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. That's very kind of you to say.
And so for those viewers out there that are looking to get a hold of you guys, how do they do that? Sorry if I took that question away.
Totally did. Get out of my head.
Well, LinkedIn, we're prolific on LinkedIn, and so that's always a good way to find us. The website's tallgrass.vc, so check it out there. And when you actually hit the buttons of contact us, it actually goes to one of us, and we're gonna get back to you. So it's a hard, it's very, very agricultural, right? You want to go talk to your neighbor, go knock on the door.
Cool.
Hard lines. That's good stuff. That's awesome. This has been great, you guys. Thank you both for the time coming down and chatting and just letting an organic conversation happen. Sorry I didn't ask the questions that were on the paper, but
I wasn't sure what they were anyway.
Okay, good. But I think this is fantastic. Really appreciate, again, you guys making the time to come down and do that. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. That's it for today, everybody. I want to thank you for making the time to listen, learn, and hope everybody was able to take something away from it. Please follow, all the fun things are going to be here somewhere or there. I don't know where they are. But looking forward to continuing to engage with all of you. So thank you again for your time.